Imagine walking out to start your day, coffee in hand, boots on, ready to feed the animals and get to work, only to find a shiny Porsche parked directly in front of your barn door. Not on the driveway. Not near the road. But smack in the middle of your private property, blocking the only access to the barn that holds your tools, equipment, and livestock feed. No note. No explanation. Just entitlement on four wheels. That's exactly what I faced. And the best part? This wasn't an accident. This was Karen, the kind of person who thinks her luxury car gives her the right to ignore boundaries, rules, and basic decency. But what she didn't count on was that this farmer doesn't play games, especially when it comes to his land. So, what happened next? Let's just say, her Porsche didn't survive the day. Hey everyone, welcome back to Voice of Tales, the channel where real stories of karma, justice, and sweet revenge come alive in the most unexpected ways. Today's tale is one for the books, especially if you've ever dealt with someone who thought the rules didn't apply to them. If you enjoy watching entitled behavior get put in its place, you're going to love this one. So, before we jump in, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts or similar experiences, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another jaw-dropping story from Voice of Tales. I live on a peaceful stretch of rural land, a working farm that's been in my family for generations. Out here, things run a little differently than in the city. We value space, respect, and common sense. My days start early, often before sunrise, tending to the crops and machinery that keep everything running. The barn is the heart of my operation. It stores essential equipment, feed, and tools I need daily. It might not look fancy to an outsider, but it's the backbone of my livelihood. For the most part, things are calm and quiet out here, at least they were, until a certain Porsche decided to treat my property like a valet lot. Every morning, my routine kicks off with prepping and starting up one of the largest machines on the farm, my combine harvester. It's not just a vehicle, it's a beast of a machine, crucial for my day-to-day work, especially during harvesting season. I use it to move grain, transport loads across the field, and handle all kinds of heavy-duty farm tasks. Maneuvering it in and out of the barn is part of my regular schedule, and while it's huge and powerful, I treat it with care, like any good farmer would. That's why when I stepped outside one morning and saw a sleek Porsche blocking the barn doors, my heart sank. Not out of concern for her car, but because I knew this would seriously delay my work. Access to my barn isn't just convenient, it's absolutely essential. Everything from my tools to feed to machinery is stored in there, and on a working farm, even a short delay can mess up an entire day's schedule. I designed the layout of my property to make sure equipment like the harvester, tractor, and trailers could easily move in and out without any trouble. So when I walked out and found a Porsche casually parked right in front of my barn door, completely blocking the entrance, it wasn't just annoying. It was disrespectful, disruptive, and a direct hit to my livelihood. Not long before this happened, a new neighbor had moved in down the road, someone who clearly wasn't familiar with rural living or basic respect. She came with money, a flashy attitude, and a Porsche she treated like a trophy. From the moment she arrived, she acted like she owned the whole countryside. No greetings, no introductions, just rolled in with an air of entitlement. She complained about the smell of livestock, the sounds of machinery, and even suggested the roads weren't clean enough for her liking. It was clear she thought our quiet, hard-working community should bend to her luxury lifestyle, and she was about to learn that's not how it works around here. Everywhere she went, she made sure people noticed her, mostly because of the way she flaunted her Porsche like it was a badge of superiority. Shiny, spotless, and clearly her pride and joy, that car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a statement. And the attitude that came with it? Pure entitlement. She'd park wherever she pleased, cut people off on our quiet country roads, and always acted like she was doing the rest of us a favor just by being here. It was obvious from day one, she thought money gave her power, and soon, she'd find out that respect, not wealth, is what actually matters in this community. From the very first encounter, it was clear she wasn't thrilled about living near a working farm. I introduced myself politely, like any good neighbor would, but she barely offered a nod. A few days later, she actually stopped me while I was moving hay with the tractor, just to complain about the dust blowing toward her driveway. Another time, she mentioned how the constant humming of my equipment ruined her morning peace. Keep in mind, this is rural land. Tractors, animals, and a bit of noise are part of the package. But she acted like she'd bought a private retreat in the middle of nowhere, and the rest of us were just background noise to her expensive lifestyle. Not long after those awkward interactions, she started pushing boundaries, literally. Her shiny Porsche began showing up closer and closer to my property line. At first, I chalked it up to careless parking. But over time, it became obvious this wasn't an accident. She'd angle her car just enough to encroach on the edge of my access path, making it harder for me to maneuver my equipment. There's plenty of space on her side of the road, but she seemed to go out of her way to park near my fence, like she was trying to make a point, or provoke a reaction. I tried to be civil at first. I left polite notes. I even walked over and spoke to her directly, told her that her parking was interfering with my ability to run my farm. But she just brushed it off with that smug smile, like I was being dramatic. "It's just a car," she'd say, or worse, she'd accuse me of being territorial. Even when I explained that large farm equipment can't just swerve or squeeze through tight spaces, she acted like I was inconveniencing her. After the third or fourth time, it became clear she wasn't just ignoring the warnings, she was daring me to do something about it. One day, after finding her Porsche yet again nearly touching my barn door, I confronted her more firmly. I told her this was private property, that she was trespassing, and that her parking was blocking essential equipment I needed for my work. Her response? She tossed her hair, rolled her eyes, and said, "It's a free country. I can park wherever I want." I stood there stunned. It wasn't just arrogance, it was complete disrespect. She genuinely believed that her fancy car gave her more rights than the rest of us. But what she didn't realize was that her sense of entitlement was about to meet cold, hard steel, and the law. Then came the final straw. One morning, I stepped outside, coffee in hand, ready to start a long day of work, only to find her Porsche parked directly in front of my barn door. Not just close. Completely blocking it. There was no way to get my harvester out, no access to the tools I needed, and no regard whatsoever for the fact that this was my land, my livelihood. It wasn't an accident either. She had angled the car like she was showing it off, as if my barn was just a backdrop for her personal photo shoot. That was the moment I knew she had crossed the line. And I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I stood there for a moment, staring at the shiny Porsche blocking my barn door, and all I could think was, I've got work to do. This wasn't just some inconvenience. It was the start of my busiest season, and time is everything when you're running a farm. My harvester was inside that barn, ready to roll, and every hour lost meant money, crops, and progress down the drain. Waiting around for some entitled neighbor to move her car wasn't an option. I had deadlines, responsibilities, and an entire field depending on me. So I made a decision, one that Karen would never forget. I did the reasonable thing first. I tried to find her. I walked over to her house, knocked on the door, rang the bell a few times. Nothing. No answer. I even called the community directory number listed for her, but of course, it went straight to voicemail. Typical. The kind of person who thinks the world revolves around them, but disappears the moment they're needed. Meanwhile, her Porsche was still parked smack in front of my barn, as if it owned the place. My patience was running thin, and the clock was ticking. Still trying to play fair, I decided to give her one last chance. I scribbled a polite but firm note and taped it right to the driver's side window of her Porsche. Something along the lines of, "You're blocking essential access to my barn. Please move your vehicle immediately." I also tried calling her one more time. No answer again. At that point, I figured I had done everything a reasonable neighbor could. I warned her. Twice. She chose to ignore me. And when you block a working farm, you're not just being rude, You're messing with someone's livelihood. Still, nothing. Hours went by, and there was no sign of Karen. No return calls, no messages, not even the decency of a text. Her Porsche sat there like a smug middle finger in front of my barn, blocking the very doors I needed to open to get my work done. I walked around it a few times, hoping she'd magically appear. But it was clear, she either didn't care or thought there would be no consequences. That's when I realized something. I wasn't going to let her entitled behavior hold my day hostage any longer. So I made a decision, a firm, clear, and absolutely necessary one. I was done waiting. This wasn't a petty inconvenience. This was my livelihood being blocked by someone who had zero respect for boundaries or basic decency. I climbed up into my harvester, fired it up, and headed straight for the barn. The engine roared to life, and I wasn't hesitating. If her Porsche was still there, that was on her. I left a warning. I gave her time. But now, I had a field to work, deadlines to meet, and no more patience left to waste. As the harvester rolled forward, its massive tires and metal frame didn't swerve or stop. I wasn't reckless. I stayed on my property, kept it slow, careful, and deliberate. But there was simply no avoiding the fact that her Porsche was in the direct path of a machine designed to clear fields, not tiptoe around entitled luxury cars. The metal crunched, the side mirror popped off, and a long, deep scrape ran along the sleek silver side. It wasn't rage-fueled, it was methodical. I had a job to do, and she had ignored every warning. I didn't go out of my way to destroy anything, but I wasn't about to be held hostage by a sports car either. Just as the harvester was rumbling its way out, I heard frantic yelling from the driveway. Karen came running out, absolutely losing her mind. She was screaming at the top of her lungs about her precious Porsche, waving her arms like it was some emergency, even though she'd been ignoring my calls and warnings all morning. She stood there in total shock, staring at the crushed side of her car like it was the end of the world. But honestly, all I could do was calmly remind her that I wasn't the one who parked illegally on my land. Karen, in full meltdown mode, immediately threatened to call the police. She was yelling about property damage and how I'd deliberately destroyed her vehicle. I stood there calmly, covered in a bit of barn dust, and told her to go right ahead. I even offered to give the cops directions when they arrived. What she didn't realize was that I had everything documented, from the photos of her car blocking my barn door, to the multiple ignored warnings and notes I'd left. If anything, she was the one trespassing and obstructing my business. Letting her call the cops was just another step toward proving how deep she'd dug her own grave. When the shouting finally died down enough for me to get a word in, I calmly explained the situation, that her Porsche was illegally parked on my private property, directly in front of my barn, obstructing essential farm operations. I told her I had tried to reach her, left a note, and even gave her one final warning before starting my workday. I made it clear that I didn't set out to damage anything. I just needed access to my barn, which I have every legal right to. My tone was steady, no yelling, no threats, just the facts. And honestly, the contrast between her tantrum and my calm explanation made her look even more unreasonable. Not long after her meltdown, the police did show up, called in by Karen, of course, in full dramatic fashion. But once they arrived and surveyed the situation, it didn't take long for them to understand exactly what had happened. I calmly showed them the property lines, the blocked barn door, and even the warning note I had left for her. I explained how I had no choice but to get my equipment out to continue my work. The officers looked at the mangled Porsche, then back at her, and told her flat out that she was in the wrong. Her car shouldn't have been there, and I had every right to access my own building. Watching her face when the cops told her I was the one within my rights? Priceless. Of course, Karen wasn't done. In true entitled fashion, she tried to sue me for property damage, claiming I had maliciously destroyed her precious Porsche. But her case fell apart the moment it hit the courtroom. I had clear photos of where she parked, security footage from my barn camera, and detailed logs of the warnings I'd given her, not to mention the legal easement protecting my access to the barn. The judge barely let her finish before tossing the case out. It was obvious to everyone that this was a petty revenge lawsuit from someone who couldn't admit they were wrong. Karen's failed lawsuit didn't just backfire legally, it blew up socially. Word spread fast around the neighborhood, especially after she had made such a dramatic scene. Neighbors who had already been annoyed by her entitled attitude finally saw her for what she really was. People started avoiding her, whispering about the incident, and even laughing when she drove by in her scratched-up rental. Her attempts to act like the victim didn't fool anyone. She was humiliated, and for once, she had no one to blame but herself. Eventually, Karen had no choice but to arrange a tow for her once pristine Porsche, now a scratched, dented, and very expensive reminder of her arrogance. Watching the tow truck haul away her luxury car from my property was the final punctuation mark to the chaos she caused. She stood there fuming, trying to save face, but there was no undoing the damage, not just to her car, but to her reputation. The image of that crumpled Porsche being pulled off my land? Let's just say, it was a picture-perfect moment of karma doing its job. After that unforgettable incident, Karen's attitude took a sharp turn. Whether it was the embarrassment, the legal reality, or the sight of her wrecked Porsche being towed off my land, something finally clicked. She stopped bothering me completely. No more entitled comments, no more illegal parking, no more drama. For a while, she kept to herself, and not long after, the moving trucks arrived. She packed up and left the neighborhood, her exit as dramatic as her arrival. And just like that, peace returned to the farm. No more entitlement, no more interference, just the quiet satisfaction of standing my ground. Sometimes, the best solution isn't yelling, threatening, or getting angry. It's quiet patience, and a 15-ton harvester doing exactly what it was built to do. See, people like Karen don't respect boundaries, polite warnings, or even common sense, but they do respect consequences when they roll up in steel and horsepower. Entitlement met reality that day, and reality won. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite part, and don't forget to subscribe to Voice of Tales for more epic, real-life justice and satisfying revenge stories.